Good afternoon to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us on the World Wide Web via the Parliament's website www.ttparliament.org. We are just a few seconds away from the start of today's sitting of the House of Representatives. On the agenda today, there's some 13 papers to be laid, and debate is expected on two motions which ought to be taken together to approve two motions, two orders. We take you over to the chamber for the start of the proceedings.
Honorable Speaker,
We welcome you to the 23rd sitting of the House in the first session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Monday, April 25th, 2016.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, I have received communication from the following members. Honorable Stuart Young MP, member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period April 25, 2016 to April 27, 2016. Dr. Fuad Khan, MP, member for Barataria San Juan, and Mr. Rushan Pari, MP, member for Miaru, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers, numbers 1 to 2. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the National Carnival Commission of Trinidad and Tobago for the years ended July 31st, 1998 and 1999. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the National Carnival Commission of Trinidad and Tobago for the 14 months ended September 30th, 2000. The second report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the National Carnival Commission of Trinidad and Tobago for the years ended September 30th, 2001, 2002, 2003, and 2004. The audited annual financial statements of National Flour Mills for the financial years ended December 31st, 2012, 2013, and 2014. The audited financial statements of the Evolving Technologies and Enterprise Development Company for the years ended September 30th, 2011, and 2012. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that papers 1 to 7 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and papers 8 to 12 to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 1 to 7 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee and papers 8 to 12 to the Public Accounts Enterprise Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Deputy Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper, the 28th Annual Report of the Integrity Commission for the year ending 2015.
Reports from committees. Prime Minister's questions. Urgent questions. Questions on notice. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister. Public business, government business, motions.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move motion number 1 standing in my name. And in moving this motion, I seek the leave of the House to debate along with this matter motion number 2 on the order paper which relates to the same subject.
Is this the wish of the House?
Aye.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 14(5) of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, that the President may by order amend the 4th schedule of the said Act. And whereas it is provided by subsection 6 of the said section that every order made under subsection 5 shall have effect from the date of publication of such order in the Gazette, and shall, after 4 days and within 21 days from the date of such publication, be submitted to Parliament, and Parliament may by resolution confirm, amend, or revoke the order. And whereas the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Order 2016 was made under Section 14(5) of the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act and published in the Gazette as Legal Notice Number 47 on the 8th day of April 2016, and whereas it is expedient to confirm the said order, be it resolved that the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Order 2016, which follows, be confirmed. Legal Notice Number 47 of 2016, Part 1 of Appendix A to the 4th Schedule to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act is amended in Item 1 by deleting paragraphs D to G and substituting the following paragraphs. D, engine size exceeding 1,999 cc's, but not exceeding 2,499 cc's, 3750 per cc. Engine size exceeding 2499 cc's, but not exceeding 2,999 cc's, $45 per cc. Engine size exceeding 2,999 cc's, but not exceeding 3,499 cc's, $52.50 per cc. Engine size exceeding 3,499 cc's, $75 per cc. Madam Speaker, the second motion is quite similar, and in effect, what we are seeking to do is to increase the taxes, the duty and motor vehicle tax, on cars with an engine size exceeding 1,999 cc's by 50%. And the purpose for this, or the purposes for this, multifold. Madam Speaker, the first purpose is to spread the adjustment, the burden of adjustment equitably across the society. We have asked people to bear with the government and understand the financial situation that we are in, and we have introduced a number of measures which have had the effect of creating some discomfort for persons in the lower income groups. And this measure, as I said, is intended to spread the burden of adjustment across the society. The second purpose, and I'm not going to be very long today, Madam Speaker, the second purpose is that larger engines consume more fuel and have more significant emissions. Now, this is a general rule. It is not an exact relationship. It is not a linear relationship. It has a lot to do with the weight of the vehicle, the technology used in the engine, the sophistication of the engine, and the efficiency in terms of the burning of fuel. But all things being equal, a larger engine will burn more fuel than a smaller engine, Madam Speaker. And therefore, in the context of the fuel subsidy and in the context of this government's commitment to the environment, and let me just say, last week I got a query as to whether Trinidad and Tobago would be signing the Paris Agreement with respect to climate change, because there was a rumor going around that over 150 countries, in fact it's over 170, would be present in the United Nations to sign the Paris Agreement to cut carbon emissions, and that for some reason some certain groups were spreading a rumor that Trinidad and Tobago would not be present. And I am very happy and proud to report, Madam Speaker, could you speak to the members of the
Members, could we please observe the standing orders with respect to silence when a member is on his legs? Please proceed, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am reading from The Guardian, the British Guardian. World governments vow to end fossil fuel era at UN climate signing ceremony. That is dated Friday, the 22nd of April, which was just a couple of days ago. And it states that representatives of more than 170 countries endorsed the Paris Agreement to cut carbon emissions, with France's president saying there is no turning back. The outpouring of support, the largest ever single-day turnout for a signing ceremony at the United Nations, underscored strong international commitment to deliver on the promises made in Paris last December to avoid a climate catastrophe. And we in Trinidad and Tobago have committed to do our part, whatever we can, to cut fossil fuel emissions, to reduce Trinidad and Tobago's carbon footprint, and to encourage our population to move towards the use of renewable energy, energy such as solar and wind, and also to use clean fuels such as compressed natural gas, also known as CNG, to move towards the use of hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and CNG-powered vehicles. And I will be returning to this Parliament, barring unforeseen circumstances, next month in May, Madam Speaker, to finalize the necessary legislative arrangements to allow a waiver of taxes on vehicles that use CNG, electric power, or a combination of gasoline, diesel, electric power, and so on, so-called hybrid vehicles. There have been moves made by the past administration with respect to incentives, but these incentives did not catch on, Madam Speaker. When one looks at the number of vehicles, the number of hybrid vehicles imported into Trinidad and Tobago, the numbers are very small, and there are reasons for that. One of the reasons was the engine size, and the other reason was the tax regime was still not sufficiently competitive to allow the price of a hybrid vehicle or an electric vehicle to land in Trinidad and Tobago and compete with your traditional combustion engine powered vehicle, Madam Speaker. So we built on what had been done before, and we are now decided to remove the customs duty. Previously, the value-added tax and the motor vehicle tax were subject to some form of concession, but this government, pushing the population or encouraging the population to use electric vehicles, hybrid, CNG powered and so on, will now be removing all taxes on these types of vehicles with respect to certain specifications. And that is all part of our commitment. As I said, I was proud and happy to be aware that the Honorable Dennis Moses represented the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago in signing the Paris Agreement at the United Nations on Friday, the 22nd of April. Notwithstanding the rumors being spread by some mischievous persons that Trinidad and Tobago would not be there. And I'm told that Senator Moses appeared on television speaking about this historic participation by Trinidad and Tobago on signing an agreement to end the fossil fuel era.
Very progressive.
But coming now to the whole question of fuel consumption, I have done some research and I have a document from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and they have looked at the average fuel consumption for private cars by type of fuel, engine capacity, CC, etc. And for the vehicles between 1,501 cc's and 1,600 cc's, the average fuel consumption for private cars is 6 liters per kilometer. And they have produced a table, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, 6 liters, sorry, per 100 kilometers. Thank you for the correction. 6 liters per 100 kilometers. And as you go up the table from 1600 to 1700, 1800, 1900, and so on, Madam Speaker, you see a progressive increase. As you get to 1,800 cc's, the fuel consumption is 7 liters per 100 kilometers. Thank you again for that correction. And as you move along and you get up to a vehicle that has 2,600 cc engine, the fuel consumption is 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers. So they have done some research, and as I said, it all depends on the sophistication of the engine, whether it is a carbureted engine or a fuel injection engine, whether it's diesel, whether it's gasoline, whether the car is heavy, whether it is light. But all things being equal, there's a significant increase in fuel consumption as the engine size goes up. And of course, anecdotally, all of us know this. All of us who have had small engine cars and large engine cars, we know this. So we are trying to conserve fuel by making these larger engined vehicles more expensive and encouraging people to bring smaller vehicles onto the road, and also to move towards hybrid vehicles and vehicles that would not conserve gasoline at all. And when one looks at the situation also, Madam Speaker, in other Caribbean countries, I did some research. I looked at Barbados, I looked at Jamaica, and I've looked at Grenada. And the taxes on a car in Grenada are somewhere in the vicinity of 80% of the landed cost for a brand new car. And as you apply the taxes to foreign used, it can get as high as 157%. Because Grenada applies a philosophy that the older the vehicle, the more damage there is to the environment. And that is why I'm stressing the environment in this debate, Madam Speaker. So in Grenada, if your car is as old as 5 years, you can pay as much as 157% in taxes. But you start off at a base of 80% in taxes, Madam Speaker. In Jamaica, Jamaica is very similar. The base again is 80%, and Barbados again, the base is of the region of 80%. We in Trinidad and Tobago for many, many years have enjoyed relatively low levels of taxation on motor cars, whereas the other islands have for many years now, imposed very, very high taxes on motor cars, and there's reason for it. You're trying to reduce the number of cars on the road, you're trying to reduce emissions, you're trying to conserve fuel, and so on, Madam Speaker. So we are not alone in this move. This is something that the rest of the Caribbean has done for many, many, many years. But because we are an oil-based economy and things were going good, this country did not choose to move in this direction that we're moving in today. I also want to clear up an issue with respect to the application of the increased duties and taxes, Madam Speaker. The way the orders have been worded, if one looks at the actual orders that have been published, if I look at the legal notice number 47, it speaks to Part 1 of Appendix A to the 4th schedule. It's amending Item 1, paragraphs D to G. And the other order has a similar intent. This measure is intended to exclude certain classes of vehicles. It targets passenger cars. So for persons who might have been worried that you had a pickup or a truck or something like that, you know, something that deals with public transportation, a maxi taxi, for example.
Farmers.
Yes, dealing with people who provide public transportation, farmers who have pickups and so on, trucks and so on. The measure excludes classes of vehicles such as taxis, maxi taxis, goods vehicles, private school buses, and vehicles used for public purposes. It is specifically targeted just to private passenger motor vehicles. Similarly, the customs measure deals with matters relating to vehicles designed for the transport of persons, such as station wagons and sedans and so on, Madam Speaker. So the intention is, as I said, to target or to spread the burden of adjustment equitably across the society without unnecessarily affecting taxis, maxi taxis, agricultural vehicles, and so on that might have an engine capacity exceeding 1,999 cc's. And the orders are worded in this way to make it clear that they exclude goods vehicles, maxi taxis, trucks, and so on, Madam Speaker. Now, let's see what the effect of all of this would be. My ministry has done a calculation for me on a favorite vehicle of the former administration. Before the member for Oropouche, is that east or west? East? Yeah, the housing one. Who is it? East. Before the member for Oropouche gets jumpy, I'm not talking about a Mercedes-Benz or a Range Rover. I'm talking about a Prado.
What you have now called Porsche.
And Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member, while I note you complain about the crosstalk, you yourself have encouraged some of it. But be that as it may, members, I would like to hear the contribution of the Honorable Minister. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Crosstalk is never warranted. So, let us look at a Toyota Land Cruiser Prado VX 2,755 cc. And under the old rates, the landed cost of that vehicle was $409,302. The customs duty, $163,721, bringing a showroom price of $573,023, to which motor vehicle tax of $82,650 would have been added, and VAT of $82,092, bringing, with all the other fees like registration and so on, a total price on the road for the Toyota Prado, $739,000. With the new taxes, the showroom price will remain the same, and the duty will go up from $163,000 to $245,000. The motor vehicle tax will go up from 82,650 to 123,975, and there will be a commensurate increase in VAT from 82,092 to 97,490, so that the Toyota Prado will now cost $877,583, Madam Speaker. So that the increase in price is from $739, which in itself was a very high price. I mean, I'm not sure who can afford a vehicle for $739, is now $877,000, Madam Speaker. So that's an actual example of the actual prices, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would also like to share with members some information on cars. I'm advised that the total number of passenger cars registered by the licensing office in 2014, 29,365, and in 2015, 30,423. So you're looking at about 30,000 vehicles per year. The authorities do not keep the data in the manner that we would all like. And in fact, we really have a problem with statistical data in this country. Because I posed the question to the licensing office, of these 30,000 vehicles, and to customs as well, of these 30,000 vehicles that were registered in 2014 and 2015, how many of them had an engine size in excess of 1,999 cc's? The data is simply not available, Madam Speaker. It is simply because we do not collect data and we do not keep data. We do not collect data, we do not keep data, and we do not manipulate data in this country in real time. What I have done is I've spoken to one of the dealers. No, not that one. I've spoken to one of the dealers, and what they told me is that they brought in 243 SUVs that have an engine capacity of about 2.2 to 2.4 liters. And they say that is the primary vehicle that they sell. It's an SUV that has an engine size exceeding 2,000 cc's, and they sell about 240, 250 of them. In terms of the other high-end vehicles, these are sold in relatively small numbers, the BMW, the Mercedes-Benz, and so on, Madam Speaker. But the fact is that the large SUVs will be affected by this measure. That is going to be one of the more significant effects of this measure. But we do feel that all things considered, Madam Speaker, it is something that we have to do. As I said, we need to push people towards driving smaller engine vehicles. We need to encourage people to use fuel-efficient vehicles and vehicles with different types of fuel. And we need to try and conserve, and we need to try and reduce environmental pollution and our carbon footprint, Madam Speaker. So those are the primary reasons why we have brought this measure to this Parliament. And I would ask, Madam Speaker, that members support it. I see no reason why anybody on the other side would not support this measure, and I beg to move.
Member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Would you permit me, before you begin, just let me put the question for debate. Honourable members, I now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2, Order 2016, the contents of which are set out below, be confirmed. Legal Notice Number 47 of 2016, 1. Part 1 of Appendix A to the 4th Schedule to the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act is amended in Item 1 by deleting paragraphs D to G and substituting the following paragraphs. D, engine side X season 19,999, cc's, but not exceeding 2,499 cc's, 37.50 per cc. Engine size exceeding 2,499 cc's, but not exceeding 2,999 cc's, 45 per cc. Engine size exceeding 2,999 cc's, but not exceeding 3,499 cc's, 52.50 per cc. Engine size exceeding 3,499 cc's, 75 per cc. Honorable members, I am to remind this Honorable House that leave has been granted for the debate on the two motions to be taken together. However, the question on each motion will be put separately to satisfy the procedural requirements. I now call on the member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, colleagues. The Minister of Finance was very straightforward in his presentation, simply outlining the measures before this House, referring to legal notice number 47, which was filed on April 8th, the same day that he brought to this House the budget review and presented to this House. And he outlined what was required, both in terms of what was being addressed in terms of the engine size, as well as what was being required of the customs arrangements, the taxes. Now, I think it is important to go beyond the measures here, though, and see how it fits into the scheme of things, so to speak, Madam Speaker, what you might call the bigger picture. Now, this Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act has been law in this country since 1934. And this is the 96th time that this act will be amended. It has not always been amended for tax purposes. But what we are amending here today is part 1 of the Appendix A of the 4th schedule, which addresses the issue of taxes based on the size of engine of automobile vehicles. And the minister spent some time explaining why he gave what he called multifold purposes to spread the adjustment equitably. He talked about the fact that large engines consume more fuel, and he was interested in fuel conservation, that he was also interested in environmental related issues, and he talked about CNG, hybrid, and electric cars as being preferable. He talked about taxes in the other islands to show that that the taxes here are not going to be exorbitant. And he cleared up the issue on the private cars only taxes only on private cars. But the end result of this is that taxes on an engine size between 1,999 cc's and 2,499 cc's will go up. The taxes on 2,499 cc's to 2,999 cc's will also go up. Taxes on 2,999 to 3,499 cc's will also go up. And taxes on all engine sizes above 3,499 will also go up. What it means, therefore, is a new car will cost a consumer or taxpayer more money. For the 1,999 to 2,499, based on a rough calculation, the increase in cost is going to be about $30,000 at the highest level. For the second group, 2499 to 2999, you're going to have an increase at the highest levels of about $45,000. For the 2999 to 3499, you're going to have an increase of about $48,000. And for the 3499 and over, you're going to have an increase of about $90,000, and the minister used the example of the SUV, which is a little more than that. Now, what is the purpose of the tax? I was a little amused that the minister didn't mention the issue of revenue generation at all. Because he mentioned everything else, but he did not mention the issue of revenue generation at all. And I found that very strange. I didn't quite understand it. I don't know if he wanted to leave it. I didn't know if he wanted to leave it alone at the beginning. I don't know if he didn't want us to engage it. I wasn't sure whether he was coming to address the revenue side in his conclusion, in his winding up. But the question is that what then is the fundamental question? Because, I mean, a tax measure is a revenue generating measure. Now, how much revenue, Minister of Finance, through you, Madam Speaker, do you expect to generate out of this measure? And I think that you should give us a rough calculation. I've done my own rough calculation. I will not venture it here, but needless to say, it's small. And therefore, I would be very curious to hear what, from your point of view, based on the calculations done by your technical people, you're likely to raise. And this is exacerbated by the fact that the minister indicated that the taxes will only apply to private vehicles. Agricultural vehicles are exempt. Commercial or T vehicles will also be exempt. There's a reduction of taxes on maxi taxis and taxis. And he didn't mention this. I don't know if he will mention it in his winding up, but he is quoted in the newspapers as saying that all vehicles en route to Trinidad and Tobago since April 8th will get what we call a BLI, that is to say, there will be no increased taxes. So I guess we will get some elaboration of that today. And if this happens, when will revenue be generated by this measure, in fact? I think that is another important question. So 2 questions. How much revenue? And when will this revenue be generated? Now, and this has to do with the ones that are in train. Let's assume that cars en route for private sale are part of sales until May 30th. Today is the 25th of April. How much revenue will we generate before the end of fiscal 2016, let's say between June and September? I think that would be a useful question if we had to make sense of what is essentially a taxation measure. And what is likely to be the revenue generated in the next fiscal year, 2016-17? He gave us some broad numbers for the number of cars imported over a certain CC. What is likely to be the revenue generated in 2016-17 from October to September? That's to say October 2016 to September 2017. Now, so that's the third revenue question. How much revenue? When will we generate it this year? Well, how much are we likely to generate, given all the things that you've said? How much are we likely to generate in a full year? And let us look, therefore, beyond revenue. Now, I don't know, but when I looked at the custom side of it and I looked at the numbers, 8703.2340, which is mentioned in our order paper here, I could not find that. So I don't know if there was a little error. So I would ask the minister if he'd check, because things like that could affect the actual taxation measures. So just check it. I saw the one for 870324.90, and I saw the one for 8703.33.90. But again, I did not see the 8703.32.50. So I don't know if it was a mistake, an error, or whatever it is. But for the sake of good order and in order to collect your taxes, I think that should be double-checked just to make sure. I am admitting immediately that I may have made an error as myself, but I did not see those two numbers in there. And these two things, of course, are tied in, because that is how you get your taxes. Now, what about the motor cars that we are talking about? What are the vehicles affected by these proposed changes? The minister mentioned the SUVs. He mentioned it first in terms of the Prado, and then he mentioned SUVs generally. But there are other cars that are involved. From Massey Motors, the Hyundai Sonata, they bring in about 24 a year. Santa Fe SUV, they bring in about 36 a year. The Nissan Altima 2.5 cc's, they bring in about 20 per year. The Nissan Altima 3.5, they bring in about 5 per year. The Nissan Murano SUV, about 15 per year. Nissan Pathfinder SUV, about 12 per year. Southern Sales, Mazda 6 sedan, 15 to 20 a year. Kia Sorento SUV, the diesel version 120, the gas version 144 a year. The Audi, the number is small. I couldn't get an exact figure. Classic Motors, you have some of these relatively small figures there too. And the reason I'm asking is the revenue question, which is, will government really realize significant revenue out of this? So, I mean, you asked the issue, why, I mean, what is the point in a way, you know? This is what, for instance, Jerome Board of Classic Motors had to say. He's president of the Automotive Dealers Association. And in Newsday, April 19th, 2016, after saying that he did not expect such a steep increase, 50%, he continued. And I'm quoting from the Newsday, who is quoting him. I am not sure if the government's approach was to create revenue for the state, but I am not sure that will work, because we will get less sales and therefore pay less taxes. He added, if the strategy is to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, that would also not work, because the luxury segment is relatively small, and we saw that from the numbers that I quoted. All right? Well, he's president of the Automobile Association. I assume that he knows what he's talking about. He's selling cars every day. That is how he makes a living. You know? So he says the luxury segment is relatively small. Consultation might have been a better approach. So basically, the Minister of Finance, in spite of all his talk about consultations, really imposed this measure as he is wont to do, without discussing the matter with anybody. He then indicated, that is to say board, Jerome Board, he then indicated, based on this Newsday article, that given government's CNG and hybrid policy, the Automotive Dealers Association would have to take another look at those options. That is to say, importing hybrid vehicles, importing CNG vehicles, importing electric vehicles. The automotive dealers don't seem to know what to make, in my view, of government policy. They can't understand why the amount of taxes, they can't understand how the taxes would work. They don't think it will have the effect that is intended. But they will look to see what they will do with electric vehicles, hybrid, and CNG. Now, let's see. Clearly, Mr. Board and the automotive dealers don't know. But let's see if the Minister of Finance knows what to make of his policy. All right. Now, Newsday, April 22nd. 2 Fridays, I'm quoting now from the article. 2 Fridays ago, Imbert announced a 50% increase in customs duty and motor vehicle taxes on luxury cars with an engine size exceeding 1999 cc's, effective immediately. I'm quoting again. The minister yesterday said he has received a number of inquiries from car dealers and individuals affected by change in policy. He said that he has agreed to a moratorium in principle, but the details are to be announced next week. Matters to be deliberated on, and this is the article continuing, include whether the new tax is to apply to vehicles in transit and whether they will apply to items here in Trinidad and Tobago already, but are yet to be cleared by customs and excise. The period of moratorium is also to be announced. This was Newsday, April 22nd, and it continues. The House of Representatives meets on Monday, that's today, to approve changes to the tax regime, and the Senate meets Thursday in order to meet a deadline of April 29th, 2016. Now, up to now, the minister has not announced how he intends to proceed on these. I saw a statement in one of the newspapers this morning indicating that he will do so today, and I suspect that he may do this either in his winding up or after he leaves the House. But I would guess that this is an important matter that you want to settle, and that the House of Representatives would be a place, if you are coming to seek support for this, that you would want to make this crystal clear. Now, I have had the occasion, Madam Speaker, to say that the problem I have with the Minister of Finance and this government, the main problem really in things such as these when they come to the House on policy issues, is the thinking itself, all right? What is contemplated, what is conceptualized. And so I ask the question, I mean, taxation measures are revenue measures. How much revenue are you going to generate from this? I think it is important to tell us. But more than that, I've also said that the problem is with the thinking through. And I think in the thinking through of the thing, we are seeing here with the to-in and fro-in, the back and forth, whether you're going to tax the vehicles already here, whether you're going to tax those on the sea, when you're going to tax those in customs, etc. We are seeing a kind of utter hopelessness and indecision in this particular sphere. The Minister of Finance, sometimes the Prime Minister, I find the thinking and I find the thinking through of things to be really problematic. I think that what happens is that they get a VAPs, they announce things, and then they wonder about what the consequences might be, and then they begin to vacillate about a number of things. So how can I illustrate this better than to say that they announced the rapid rail and carry it in the campaign? We tell them it was a bad idea. The IDB tell them now it's a bad idea, so the rapid rail gone. The revenue measures in the October budget, we told them it was attainable, unattainable. The Minister of Finance came himself in April and said that it was unattainable in the first half by about $3 billion. So that turned out to be something not properly thought through. The oil and gas price in the October budget, unrealistic, not properly thought through. Not so much the oil price, which could be excused, but the gas price especially, which was pitched at 2.75. This $63 billion budget in October, it made absolutely no sense. We told them so, but they brought it anyway. The budget cut that he said he effected in April in the mid-year review of $4 billion, when you look at it really, it's a sham, because there was already a suppression of a $7 billion savings, or a suppression of expenditure to enlist savings for the first 6 months of the year. The 50% tax on motor vehicles, the waffling, the creation of uncertainty, I don't see how anybody can seriously think that the government knows what it is doing in this taxation measure. You have not yet decided, you're coming here to pass the thing. You have not decided who will pay, when. All right? The policy objectives are uncertain. The revenue objective was not even mentioned. And you cannot tell me, Minister of Finance, that part of the rationale for the taxation was not revenue. What is the point? What are you doing? What do you really want to do? Now, in addition to this, I want to say something. You know, these deal with new cars. And I want to say that bawling in the wings, unattended to, is the question of the used car dealers in the country. There are about 300 of them who belong to the Automobile Dealers Association, and approximately 200 more who are non-members. At the very minimum, these are 300. That is what I am told. I have to go by the numbers that are given to me. That is to say, they do not belong to the Automobile Association. There might be 200 entrepreneurs who buy 5 cars or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. But let us take the smaller number. Let us take the small number, which is 300. They have a national quota of 13,500 cars per year. That is what they have. Each of these dealers, the ones in the association, are permitted to import between 15 cars and 250 vehicles per year, based on a licensing arrangements. Now, based on these new taxes, 10 or 15% will be of 10 or 15% of their imports are going to be affected by the new import duty. The dealers also claim that the fact that they can no longer import 6-year-old vehicles and they now have to import 4-year vehicles, it means that they are stifled in terms of their ability to import, because 4-year-old vehicles are very hard to secure from their original sources, as they have been doing in the past. And now they have the additional situation in which the new car dealers, some of them, want to get into the importation of what is known as what do you call them? Pre-used, pre-owned vehicles, second-hand vehicles. Okay? So, well, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it, Minister of Finance. I'm not quibbling over the words here. I'm really raising the question of, in a society in which you have different players doing different things, whether or not these people are going to be allowed to import CNG vehicles, hybrid and electric vehicles that are used vehicles, and secondly, whether or not with these taxes and so on that you are doing, there is also a policy on the part of the government to basically squeeze these used car dealers out of business and give an additional source of business to the existing bigger players in the new car businesses. I think that that is a legitimate issue to raise, because it is an issue of how the pie, so to speak, in terms of the industry, the automobile industry, is shared. And I want to say that I was Minister of Industry in the 1990s. And this issue of wanting to eliminate the used car dealers of the country was an issue even then. So having said that, I want an unequivocal position from the Minister of Finance, which is, you work for me because I am a taxpayer. I want to tell you that. You work for me because I am a citizen. You work for me because I am here in this house as a representative of the people. And neither as a citizen, as a member of this house, nor as a person seeking information will I tolerate that terrible arrogance. So I would like an unequivocal answer as to how the used car vehicle fits into this process, and I would also like the answers to the other questions that I posed with regard to revenue. Now, I have taken the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to say in the past that a budget is not about accounting primarily. Although no one would underestimate the importance of crunching the numbers and managing them and making them an essential part of the budget. And I've also taken the opportunity to say that a budget is about political economy more than anything else. And a budget often consists of an annual list of selected fiscal measures to make development happen. And I stress the issue of development because that is what it is. If you have a 5-year plan for a country, 5 budgets are what are going to get you there. So too are taxes, you know. Taxes are not only about revenue. It is part of the policy matrix in any country. So when you do taxes, you have to ask yourself, who am I taxing? Why am I taxing them? What is being taxed? Why? What are you taxing them for? And what is the revenue to be used for? These are very important things. Up to now, based on everything that we have heard in this parliament, except for projects identified, this government has not identified one priority for Trinidad and Tobago. They get parliamentary approval to borrow $50 billion, not one priority identified. They want to take $1.5 billion out of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. US. No priorities, US, no priorities identified. They're taxing left, right, and center to raise revenue. No priorities for spending.
How much revenue they brought?
Well, let me tell you something, Madam Speaker, through you to the Honorable Minister of Finance, something that is rather fundamental, which is that the purpose of taxes, of taxation measures, is to finance development priorities. And what this means is that you have to know what your priorities are before you allocate the finance that you are collecting. We know what ours was for 5 years. It was crime, it was food crime reduction, food security, health and hospitals, human development, diversification, competitiveness, and innovation. Those were the 5. And I would like to ask, what is the priority for which these taxation measures are so much a part of your revenue strategy and your national policy? What do you want to achieve? Where are you taking the country? What is your plan of action? When are you going to start to do something that the country can understand?
Honourable Member for
that will-
Caroni, your 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. Are you going to avail yourself of those 15 minutes?
I would like to, Madam
You
Speaker,
may
with your
you may
permission.
proceed.
But this is a motion on taxes. In fact, 2 motions on taxes that we are debating together. And I was talking about taxation policy and taxation policy in the context of wider development policy, beginning with the assumption that taxation is not only to raise revenue to meet expenditure, because the first law of enlightened expenditure strategy is what are your priorities. Now, and secondly, how does that fit in your development plan? What I am saying, therefore, is that it is important to rationalize expenditure in order to design a rationale for revenue. You have to deal with the expenditure first. We have said this before, we said this in the budget review, we said this in the budget debate. But bad taxation policy, with bad taxation policy, you could run out investment, you could kill business, you could frustrate entrepreneurship, you could pauperize the middle class, you could violate the poor, and you could brutalize the vulnerable. And I want to say to this population, the citizens of this country, if we in this opposition do not restrain this government, that is where you are likely to see this blessed country ending up. And ordinary people will bawl. And I want to say this insistence on looking at the expenditure, curtailing the expenditure, redesigning the expenditure pattern in relation to priorities, and then aligning revenues for development strategy in relation to that is something that we are going to hold you to in this parliament because we want to see it. Now, I want to say something about taxes in this country because this is a taxation measure and it is important to say it. The first thing that I want to say about taxes is that corporations in this country are not paying their fair share of taxes, and therefore the burden of raising revenue is shifted to salaried workers and wage earners who can be captured by the PAYE system, and the poor who must pay VAT on almost everything they consume. So if you want to deal with the question of equity, which you said was a primary consideration in your taxation strategy, then you must take that into account. The middle class, the workers, the poor, the vulnerable they are the ones put under pressure when corporations do not pay their fair share. The second thing that I would like to say about taxes is that not enough businesses pay their taxes, because the taxes can be avoided without penalty. And secondly, the Board of Inland Revenue and the taxation system in this country is not citizen-friendly, and it does not provide a supportive environment to facilitate and enhance cooperation. So that is something that you need to deal with. Now, the third thing I would like to say about taxes in this country is that it is not right to use VAT, which impacts disproportionately on working people and the low income, to make up for the deficiencies in a taxation system which is dysfunctional. And the fourth issue is that unless you have a business-friendly environment and a climate of business and consumer confidence, then all talk about taxes, no matter what they are and where they hit, are going to get people furious. So taxation is not only about revenue, it is also about fairness, about equity and sustainable development. And that also includes the issue of distribution, not just equity, but distribution. Now, distribution, I don't want people to get me wrong, does not mean taking from the rich to give to the poor. It means designing a system where the rich pay their fair share and the poor can have a sustainable life, so that the gap between rich and poor can narrow rather than widen. According to Alex Colm of the Oxford Council on Good Governance, in an article entitled Taxation, Policy and Development, he argues the most important role of taxes is revenue. And he emphasizes for short-term, for medium-term, for long-term purposes. So it is not just revenue, these are my words. It is sustainable revenue, sustainable income for the country. And in our situation, where our most sustainable source of income so far, oil energy, is now gone in a way, we have to be concerned about how we do this, not just for the short term. The second important rule is redistribution. This is Colm's words. To facilitate human development on as wide a scale as possible. This is an important consideration, because the taxation measures must cause to happen an inclusive strategy for human development. It must not be one that singles out for oppression part of the society. The third reason is representation. Remember the phrase from the United States, no taxation without representation? Implicit in that, and this goes back even to the Magna Carta days, is that if you pay taxes, it must be because you are included as a citizen, so that there is an element of that in the taxation. This is not my argument, this is Colm's argument. So it is important that the net be inclusive or as wide as possible. And the fourth is the repricing of economic alternatives, a tool to influence behavior of individual or corporate citizens, such as encouraging savings or penalizing polluters, for instance, who damage the environment. So the question here is, will this particular tax address revenue in a serious way? The answer is no. Will this tax facilitate redistribution in a constructive way? The answer is no. Will this tax make people feel that because they are represented, the tax is justified? The answer is no. Will this tax force people to choose an alternative? Well, it might. They might, but it is difficult to say and too soon to say. And the tax alone will not do it. It depends on other things. And therefore, this gets me to the question, of the CNG, the environment, the sustainable development arguments made by the Honorable Minister. I want to say to you, that with regard to CNG, we passed in the budget of 2010 into law new incentives such as the removal of motor vehicle tax and VAT on new CNG vehicles and on CNG kits. We did that in 2010. We gave tax credits for individuals who converted vehicles in 2010. We did that in 2010. We opened the first new CNG station in 20 years. Brentwood, Unipet, Medford, and Peak in Tagariqua. Ramco, Trin City Station, I think that is now open as well today. There's St. Christopher's on Ryson Road. I don't know if that's completed and ready now. The conversion of 10% of PTSC buses, many operational since 2 years ago. We did that. Citygate has a CNG station for buses. We put it there. NGC has 200 CNG cars. We made that happen. We facilitated the process. NGC owns a private CNG station. Petrotrin has done some conversion to CNG. NGC CNG formed and signed a MOU with Maxi Taxi and Unipet and NPC for CNG conversion. We did that. Perhaps it was not effected to the extent that we would have liked, but we set that into motion. The Bureau of Standards has set up new CNG standards. We did that. The NEC training for CNG technicians, we did that. Conversion of license for Neil and Matsi Automotive, Ansa Makal and Dunmore in Tunapuna Road, so that they can do the conversions to CNG. 10 sites recently publicly announced by the Minister of Energy were decided on and initiated in our time. And we commend the Minister of Energy for following through on it because it is good for the country. So we support the conversion. We started it, we implemented it, we helped to facilitate it, and we will support you to do it because it is good for the country. It is good for energy consumption, it is good for conversion, it is good for the atmosphere, the air, and we want to do that. We have no problem with that. But I want to say that with the rapid rail gone, what it means now is that you still have a public policy issue with regard to transportation. And I want to share with you some of the solutions that we had for transportation in this country. Transit hubs to be constructed in Chaguanas, Arima, and St. Augustine. Properly rationalized, dedicated school bus transportation to be instituted, CNG buses. Dedicated bus service for industrial estate workers. Dedicated, predictable bus rapid transit systems from north to south and east to west will be established. Several considerations have been taken into account, namely rationalization of what exists, management of traffic, capacity for effectiveness, cost effectiveness, and sustainability. And we have a number of identified sites for park and ride facilities and a number of dedicated issues related to the transportation system, all not just to conversion, to get cars off the road, linked to decentralization. That is why we were building the Ministry of Tertiary Education in the center of the country. That is why we had an LED project in Point Forte. That is why we had 5 growth poles across the country. The whole idea was the decentralization and the transformation of a fossil fuel economy and the reduction of cars on the road through public transportation measures would have gone hand in hand. So I want to say to you that when I talk about the thinking and the thinking through, it is these things that we are concerned about. That you come up with these measures and you put one installment of the process without knowing how it will fit into anything else. And we have been accused of not knowing what we're doing. You can see visibly the result of what we did. But I want to tell you that everything that we thought about, we thought through what the consequences were. Madam Speaker, I will wind up on this minute. The problem, Madam Speaker, is not just the tax, but taxation policy, and taxation policy in the context of development strategy. That is the challenge, and I think this government has a big challenge with regard to that. In this regard, these taxation measures before us, while we will approve them together with the government, represent a complete and utter failure as a revenue measure. Honorable Speaker, the member of finance, the Minister of Finance just called me an idiot.
Yes. We heard him.
And I want to say,
We heard him.
and I want to say,
Excuse me, members, could we have some order, please? Please proceed, member.
and I want to say that for that description of myself, all I would say, he is
Madam Speaker, the member is imputing improper motives.
not imputed.
I wasn't talking about him.
And member, I'll give you some, members, please. Member for Caroni Central, I'll give you a little injury time. But I just want to say this. Talk filters up. And I did hear the comment of idiot. Member for Diego Martin, notice. Although you may say that the comment was not directed to anybody in particular, I would want to say that that is not language to be tolerated in this house. Continue. Caroni Central, you have 1 minute left to wind.
Madam Speaker, I was going to return the insult, but I will not do it. I will not do it. All I would say is that the taxation measures of the Minister of Finance are simply to provoke vexation in the system. It has become a major nuisance in the lives of people without any strategic purpose related to policy or development. And with that, Madam Speaker, I close my case.
Member for Arouca Maloney.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have sat in the Parliament for several months since this new Parliament was inaugurated. And time after time, the member for Caroni Central participates in these debates, and several of the debates that we have had here, the member for Caroni Central has participated. And Madam Speaker, I'd like to say on nearly every occasion, the member for Caroni Central has not been completely honest in his assessment of what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to the economy and as it relates to the...
I would not say that it's insinuating. I'll just ask you, member, to be a little more temperate in your language.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for that caution. But it has reached the point, Madam Speaker, where the member for Caroni Central on each occasion tries to give the impression that the government is not working in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, if I may be so bold as to say, That has never been the case with any People's National Movement government. Madam Speaker, if truth be told, one of the only governments that works assiduously for all the people of Trinidad and Tobago, whether as a party in opposition or as a party in government, is the People's National Movement, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I'd be very honest with you, as I have been with my colleague from Pointe-a-Pierre. I did indicate that there will be only 2 speakers on this side. And, Madam Speaker, I was not one of the 2. But having heard what Caroni Central continues to foist on the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I felt it important to make a contribution on this occasion. Madam Speaker, at no time did the Minister of Finance indicate that the policy as it relates to motor vehicles, which is the motion that is before us today, was a taxation policy of the government that was covering taxation for all means. At no time did the minister indicate that. The minister was very, very upfront, and the minister stated categorically that, 1, the burden of adjustment must be spread amongst all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. The member for Caroni Central has said that we are only taxing, as he put, I think he said, the poor people of Trinidad and Tobago. But Madam Speaker, if we are honest, we are the ones who reduced VAT from 15% to 12.5%. Madam Speaker, if we are honest, the persons who have not passed on that 12.5%.
Order. Continue.
The persons who have not passed on that 12.5% is not the government of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, we did what we were supposed to do, which was to reduce the VAT. And what has to be done is for the VAT to be actually reduced and for it to be passed on to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I would also like to make the point where those on the other side in government indicated that they would now zero rate certain items. What were the items that were zero rated, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, a number of items that only the rich had access to. So it did not affect the normal basket of goods of the normal man in the street. So that zero rating did not assist anyone, because the items that had been zero rated all the time, milk, flour, those kinds of items were always zero rated, Madam Speaker. So when they come here, no, I won't.
No. Well done,
Could I then ask on a point of order?
What is
Because
your
you
point
are.
of, what is
No,
your point
I'll
of
ask the
order?
speaker.
Time. You have a point of order. Could you kindly quote the standing order, please?
No, sorry. I will.
Continue, please.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, we have sat here session after session, and the member for Caroni Central continues to indicate that we have no plan, we have no policy. But Madam Speaker, I would like to remind the member for Caroni Central, and he is the one that brought the issue of the CNG stations. And first of all, I'd like to correct the record and say the first CNC stations were open, CNC. The first, I know it's CNG, but I keep saying C. The first CNG stations were opened by Patrick Manning as Minister of Energy. so they were not the first. Secondly, Madam Speaker.
14 of them to be exact.
One for how much years?
14.
Secondly, Madam Speaker,
14.
I would like to correct the record again and indicate that the CNG stations that were opened under the last administration cannot and do not function fully because the UNC administration, you want me to repeat?
No, please, repeat it.
You want me to repeat? Okay. The CNG stations.
Interruption is going to be made. I would strictly ask that people comply with Standing Order 47. Continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The CNG stations cannot and did not function fully because the UNC administration did not procure the necessary compressors necessary to give customers the benefit of the new technology. In fact, as is their custom, they bungled the entire procurement process as it relates to CNG stations. So, Madam Speaker, we are now in the process of fixing what they tried to do. So, in fact, the CNG stations do not operate fully, and we do not have a benefit, as the member for Caroni Central tried to imply. Madam Speaker, let me also indicate, as it relates to the issue of getting things done and diversification and using the private sector in this country, one of the issues that has consistently been a challenge for members of the private sector, particularly as it relates to construction, is the issue of the town and country planning and the EMA. Madam Speaker, when I entered the Ministry of Planning and Development, there were over 177 appeals on town and country issues that were languishing in the Ministry of Planning, and that stymied development for the private sector. You talked about getting things done. You said we had no policy. And one of the things that we have to do is rectify that issue that was left languishing by the member for Caroni Central in his capacity as Minister of Planning and Development. 100.
Member for Caroni Central, please, as I said, if you wish to make an interruption and you comply with Standing Order 47, you will be given an opportunity. Please, otherwise, please contain yourself. Member, please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam. 177 matters that were languishing there from 2011 that the minister just left.
How much?
177 development projects. 177 projects left by the member for Caroni Central. The Minister of Planning and Development that had gone through the appeals process and were never signed off by the minister, who comes here nearly every Friday to pontificate and tell us on this side.
47-1.
47-1? And can I ask what is the matter under 47-1A?
Well, she is misleading the House.
No, members. Member for Laventille West, as I've said to members, everything is heard by the chair. Please contain yourself. Member for Central, Caroni Central, yes.
Member for Arouca Maloney is misleading the House on 3 counts.
Member, in terms of, you said you're raising an objection under 47(1)(e). Might I ask, what is the complaint under 47(1)(e)?
Complaint?
Under 47(1)(e), because that's the standing order you sought to invoke.
She's misleading the House on 3 counts. She's misleading the House on the grounds that I said that we did the first station after 20 years. And she said, I said we did the first station.
Yes, but member, you may wish to correct something that is being said, but your turn has gone. So that I can't direct you how to proceed. But this is a debate. Other members would be allowed an opportunity on your side. Member for Arouca, Maloney, please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Again, Madam Speaker, there is the existing situation where the member for Caroni Central continues to say that we're trying to develop policy by using taxation. In fact, Madam Speaker, taxation has been one of the last resorts of this administration. In fact, what we have been attempting to do is to encourage the private sector, to incentivize the private sector, and as a matter of record, we have been in discussions with the Inter-American Development Bank with regard to its new IIC policy as it relates to incentivizing the private sector, something that seemed to be of no interest to those on the other side when they occupied the halls of government. They were very limited in whom they decided to assist in the private sector. What our policy is very clear on is that we will give incentives to the private sector as a whole, and whomsoever is desirous of accessing the incentives would be very willing to accept the incentives that we have introduced. And Madam Speaker, let me indicate that as it relates to the IDB, there will be a mission here later this month to talk to the private sector specifically about the issue of diversification. Madam Speaker, we heard a lot from the other side during their term of office about the issue of diversification, but we saw nothing coming forward. What we on this side are doing, we are speaking about it and we are actioning what we have spoken about. So, Madam Speaker, this week, the IDB will have a mission in Trinidad and Tobago to talk to the private sector about what can be done through the private sector window of the IDB in order to incentivize the private sector in Trinidad and Tobago. That is how you diversify an economy, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, it does not end there. In fact, in our agricultural sector, we have also been working closely with farmers, large and small, to ensure that they also move in that direction. We have stated very, very clearly that the food import bill is much too high, and from the time the Minister of Finance spoke in the budget debate, he talked about ensuring that local farmers produce to the extent that we can in fact see a reduction in the food import bill. And the indications are that we are moving inexorably in that direction. Madam Speaker, it does not end there. We have been working with the creative industries sector to ensure that there's a stimulation of the creative industries to not only, I never said it was new, But I'm saying that we are working with them. I don't think you all did anything with the creative industry sector, not one thing. All they did...
No, they fire people. They fire good people.
Member,
all...
direct your comments this week.
Certainly, madam. All you did was talk, and more talk. And only a small number of people, Madam Speaker, benefited when the other side were in office. Only a small number of people. And they benefited to a very large extent. Madam Speaker, another area that we have been working assiduously on is stimulating the growth in the energy services sector by identifying and exploiting opportunities for the provision of these services, not only within our borders, but outside of Trinidad and Tobago. You would recall, Madam Speaker, that when in 2010, there were a series of discussions, and we were on the verge of working with a number of the African nations with regard to their energy sector. But that was put completely on hold by the last administration. Madam Speaker, we're in the process of reviving those relationships, and we will see a major thrust in that department. So, Madam Speaker, I want to state categorically that unlike what Caroni Central continues to peddle, we on this side know exactly what direction we are taking. We know exactly the direction in which we are going. And Madam Speaker, ours is the opportunity, as we have formed this government, to involve all the people of Trinidad and Tobago, all the stakeholders, and we will continue to speak with them through the National Tripartite Council and through the other avenues that we have set up in order to ensure that all citizens find their way through this challenging time. And Madam Speaker, let me also indicate that a lot of the challenges in which we find ourselves had their genesis in the maladministration of the last government. And Madam Speaker, I rise to support the motion that is before, the two motions that are before this House, and I trust that the people of Trinidad and Tobago will understand the issues before us and the fact that in many instances what we are trying to do is for all the people to eventually come out of this as unscathed as possible. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche East.
48.
48.
44-8, sorry.
Caroni Central. It is to clear up something that was said of an explanation. You're entitled to 2 minutes at maximum.
I'll be less than 2 minutes, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Planning, in trying to paint me as someone who was misrepresented a lot of information. The first thing is that she said that I said we did the first CNG station. I said no such thing. I said it was the first one in 20 years. I acknowledge the work done by the Honorable Patrick Manning, Prime Minister of this country. She said that I left 147 files unsigned, 177 or whatever it is, unsigned on my desk. Every day, I used to sign 25 files. What it means is that in the heat of the election, I did not sign the files for a week. It means that I did not sign the files for a week. I want to say when I came...
Members, order. Member, is that offered because there was a misrepresentation? Is that offered because there was a misrepresentation?
Yes, because she did not give the context.
No. Members, please. May we have some order, please? Member, I will permit you to, under this standing order, to just deal with matters that were dealt with by misrepresentation. Okay? Not context.
And
Speaker, before you proceed, before my colleague proceeds, I raise standing order 48-5.
I just ask all members in speaking, in observing the decorum of this House, to specifically pay regard to this rule, honorable member, or member for whichever constituency, or by the portfolio of the member. Please be guided.
I said Minister of Finance. Simply to continue, Madam Speaker, I want to say that when I came into the Ministry of Planning, there had in fact been 4,000 files that had not been addressed. On the issue of diversification, I wish to say that evidence of diversification, I will just offer a few, would be the work in Shagaramas, which the minister is now benefiting from. In
misrepresentation.
She said there was nothing.
The honorable member said, yes? The honorable member said?
The honorable member said that nothing was done by way of diversification. So the back office work of the financial sector involving the Bank of Nova Scotia, involving RBC, involving the insurance companies.
Yes, member. Your 2 minutes are up. But I just want to advise members with respect to this particular standing order which was invoked. It's a very narrow standing order. There are other ways that matters. That's what a debate is about. Other members can deal with things that have come up in the debate. So this is a very narrow standing order. Okay? Member for Oropouche East.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it's an honor to join this debate on the both motions before us today. Madam Speaker, it is my intention to raise a few matters alluded to by the Honourable Minister of Finance in his introduction earlier this afternoon. But before I get to that, I was really taken aback somewhat that the last speaker opposite, when the member rose, the member indicated that it was not the member's time, the member was not carded to speak, and the member therefore chose to speak because somehow the member for Caroni Central aroused or titillate or excited the member to get on her feet and respond with a cameo appearance for 20 odd minutes or so. And that 20 minutes, Madam Speaker, I took my notes here, dealt with taxation measures, VAT, CNG stations, UNCs, lack of a proper administration, diversification, incentivizing the private sector, the IDB role in assisting the government to work with the private sector, the food import bill, the creative industries sector, and the maladministration, as the member said, of the last government. That was done in 20 minutes. Now, I am very curious to know who is the next speaker that was prepared to speak today. That 20 minutes was more valuable than the preparation of the next speaker on the government benches. Who would have spent time preparing, reading the motions and preparing a good argument to come before us. And in a cameo appearance of 20 minutes, plowed through all that material. And I agreed with the member. The member really was not carded to speak. And when the batting order changed, that cameo appearance gave us no runs. And the batsman left as the batsman entered. It would score the same point. Madam Speaker, such extemporing might be good elsewhere. But in a debate like this, one would have hoped that persons would be prepared and relating to the issue. But the member for Caroni Central, I imagine, can excite persons to respond. To his credit, he can do that. Madam Speaker, I will respond to some of those matters raised by the member for Arouca Maloney later. But first, to get back to the substantive issue of the motions before us, the Minister of Finance came to the House today and drew us out on a Monday and demanded that we come here on a Monday because the time is upon him and he would just have checked his calendar to realize that he was running out of days and therefore the House must meet on Monday to deal with this matter. And the member made his case somewhat for support to both motions. Madam Speaker, like the member for Caroni Central, I was taken aback. The member told us that he has here today a twin objective: to make the burden equitable, and secondly, to save the environment and the earth. So the twin objectives, one environment and one socializing the burden almost, they use his argument, but could not tell us exactly how much revenue you can raise. Madam Speaker, in my constituency on Debe Junction, when a doubles man go out in the morning, he knows how much doubles he has. He knows by 12 o'clock if he sells X amount, he would get Y income. He knows at the end of the day, if he sells Y, he gets X. He will know for the entire day what is my revenue coming to me depending on how much bara and chana and doubles I sell. I want to put it to you, Madam Speaker, that a doubles man could run this country better than the member for Diego Martin. Because the member for Diego Martin Northeast cannot tell us what revenue, and you see the cameo appearance want to continue. You had 45 minutes to talk, you couldn't take it. I talking now, you want to talk while I talk. Madam Speaker, a nutsman goes out in the morning, and he knows I have a bag of nuts here. I will check to see how much I sell by 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and he's very clear on how much money he will make. The Minister of Finance comes to the House, increases tax, but cannot tell us how much money he's expecting to make. The nutsman would make a better Minister of Finance than the member for Diego Martin Northeast. And the member for Diego Martin Northeast advertised in the newspaper, and I have an article here that came to us earlier, where in anticipation of this debate, the Trinidad Guardian, Monday, April 25th, I believe today, bold headline, Imbert to announce tax waiver details today on luxury cars. And high anticipation that today we will get a good analysis of what waivers are coming, how, why, to who. But so far, the Minister of Finance did not tell us anything about these waivers. Where, how, what is the policy, what is the procedure, who will benefit, who will not benefit, why? Because the member for Caroni Central again made the point. This is economic policy by VAPs. So you announce online tax, and then when you realize you didn't think it through, you say, hold on, I think we'll have to exempt certain goods online. You announce VAT reduction, and when you work it through, you say, no, I think we have to change the schedules somewhat. You announce, and we have the announcement here, Madam Speaker, in the mid-year review. I just want to quote from the mid-year review. It was on the 8th of April 2016. And the Minister of Finance told us, he says, Madam Speaker, in order to raise the revenue to deal with all these matters in the Finance Committee report, I'm at page 20, to deal with all of the goods and services and other items of expenditure, we intend to increase by 50% custom duties, motor vehicle tax on luxury vehicles, starting with private motor vehicles with an engine size exceeding 1999 cc, cubic capacity of the engine size, cc. And he blurted out, this measure will take effect immediately. That was on the 8th of April. Then today, a few days after, the Minister of Finance indicated that we will have a waiver because people didn't adjust the suddenness of that policy.
What happened to the used car dealers?
No, yeah, the used car dealers, nobody adjusted the suddenness. But this is a government for 7 months telling us that they're consulting everybody. At every turn, at every street corner, we're consulting.
They have a manifesto.
But the people who are to be affected, the Minister of Finance says they were taken by the suddenness. So they didn't know because you did not consult, you did not inform, never engaged. And we have tax waiver details. But what are the details? We don't know. So we have several companies in the country, some of us know them. I mean, is it Sterling Services? Sterling Services, Diamond Motors, Massey, importing new cars. And Samaka. Now, where is this list coming from? How is this to work? Are you saying that the companies will give the Ministry of Finance and the Minister a list and say, boss, these 20 people apply last week for the pay down on vehicles and we are importing? Because that is a process. Persons will pay a certain percentage of the cost. It goes to the dealer. They make a request to import. It takes a few months. It will come down here on the bond, as he quite rightly said. That will take some time as well. Go into the showroom. That will take some time. But how much time? How is this to be fixed? Are you dependent on the company to give you a list of all those persons who have ordered motor vehicles, luxury cars over 1999 cc? And who are they?
Yes.
Who are they? And how can you put a policy in place where the dealer will just inform the Ministry of Finance? They could put in John Smith, Jane Smith, anybody. So what happens in a system like this where you don't think it out is that it is open for corruption. It is open for misuse. So the company says they abuse that system.
Yes.
So they can now call up people, their friends and family, and special clients and financiers and say, boss, this thing coming, go down quick and order your car. And when they go to order, they backdate that by a few weeks and say, look, my name down there, no. My name down there. We ordered. And they supply a list to the Ministry of Finance to get exempted from the 50%. Because how else could you do it?
Any former minister.
And today I would ask the minister, is he aware of any former minister in the PNM administration or any minister in the current administration who have also ordered brand new luxury motor vehicles that will benefit from this waiver? And tell us. But if you don't tell us, I will tell us. I will tell us. Madam Speaker, because it's one thing to say ministers can purchase. This doesn't affect ministers, we know. They can purchase without paying motor vehicle tax, custom duties, VAT and so on. They know that. They purchase every 2 years, I believe, a vehicle. And nothing is wrong with that. That is the perk of the office, I always say. The former member for San Fernando East had it right. That is the perk for the office. Although I think they took a decision now not to avail themselves of that, but that's their issue. After they buy it. After they buy it, they said we're not availing ourselves. Yeah. Then they discover that ministers already ordered. Because what you do is you order not for yourself, but for friend, family, spouse, partner, spouse and partner. And you order, vehicles are there. What is the policy surrounding the waiver of taxes on motor vehicles already ordered? Our information is that, what is that?
Attorney General, in terms of what statement?
Madam Speaker, 48.6 in respect of the statements that he's making about ordering vehicles for some untoward purpose. It is by far past the tone. It is delving into some degree of impropriety by tone, by context, and by content.
Member for Oropouche East, in terms of the statement, I would say by actual expression of words, unless you have facts to back that up, I'd ask you to withdraw that.
Madam Speaker, I am merely asking a question. I have never made a statement.
Member, member, in terms of the context itself and your tone did not connote a question. So I'd ask you, there is a tone for a question for all those who don't know, but please withdraw that statement.
Speaker, could I change my tone? Could I, Madam Speaker, could I humbly and gently ask the member opposite if they are aware of other members and ministers who may have ordered luxury motor vehicles?
Madam Speaker, on a point of general privilege under Section 55. And I'm standing on a point of order. Yes, Madam Speaker. Most respectfully, for a past leader of government business in this House, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, just to raise the point.
Members. Continue, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, under 48(6), not only is this device a ruse to circumvent your direct ruling, but I take serious affront. If the member has something to say that is factual, I have no complaint. But one must have the courage to say what one wants to say, not to speak in circles this way and then to flout the chair's ruling, Madam Speaker.
Member for Caroni East. Member for Caroni East. Member for Diego Martin Northeast. Member for Oropouche East. I would direct that you withdraw the question and please continue. You must first withdraw it.
Madam Speaker, I withdraw.
Thank you.
Methinks the member protested too much. Could I proceed?
Well, member, please, for all members here, when the chair rules, I would rather not hear any comment based on my ruling. Please continue.
Speaker, but I would never speak
on 48(6) on the record of this Parliament. I am saying, if the member has something to say, then have the courage to say it openly. But to say about protest, Madam Speaker, it is insulting within the parameters of 48(6).
Attorney General, the member has already withdrawn the statement. Excuse me, members. Members, everybody in here is bound by the standing orders. Your behavior is beneath the decorum required of this House, and that would be tolerated by this House. This might be a very stimulating debate, but everybody would have the opportunity to speak in accordance with the standing orders. I rule that a member of Oropouche East withdraws his statement. I take it he has. And I also, for the guidance of all members here, in future, when the chair rules, I really don't want what in local parlance is called the echo. Continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On this matter of climate change, is okay? Yeah. On the climate change issue, the member for Diego Martin Northeast and Minister gave us some information because he was seeking to clarify some matters. And given that one of the objectives of this bill is, of course, to deal with matters of energy and fossil fuel reduction and so on, and demand, the Minister of Finance sought to correct the record somewhat, he believed, concerning the signing of the global instrument on climate change and Trinidad and Tobago's participation in that. I am sure the member for Diego Martin Northeast, I know him to be a very honorable man. I am sure it was never his intention to mislead the Parliament nor the country. When the member, Minister of Finance, indicated that Senator the Honorable Moses attended and signed the international instrument in Paris in December.
I never said that. I never said that.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy for the clarification from the member, so I can proceed. For the record, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and something else I think he's called, signed the instrument in New York quite recently. But I can't hear myself. Member, I would like to indicate that in December 2015, when this matter was being discussed and signed on to in Paris, Trinidad and Tobago had 3 delegates, of which there were no minister or head of government. The Prime Minister of India was there, the President of the United States were there, about 5 prime ministers and the CARICOM were there. There was no Prime Minister from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm sure the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago had other more important matters to deal with. I think he was in London attending a party fundraiser, but he was not in Paris. Not in Paris, where other heads of government were to show their commitment to this global climate change instrument. And Trinidad and Tobago had 3 delegates. The only other country with such a low turnout, I believe, was war-torn Syria. The only other country. So the government's commitment to the environment must be measured. Because they signed a couple of days ago. Apart from that, Madam Speaker, they made a big thing of environment. Those CARICOM nations signed in December already ratified into law the treaty. Trinidad and Tobago, as of this moment, has not ratified the instrument. So when you speak and boast about your commitment to the environment, when we were in office, there was a ministry charged with the environment.
They disbanded that ministry.
They disbanded it. It is subsumed within, I think, 2 or 3 different ministries now.
Yes.
So you're not sure where one agency is as opposed to the other, all under the environment.
Swim calling public utility.
And Madam Speaker, I am also informed, Madam Speaker, that Grenada, which remember boast about in terms of their car, how they purchase car and so on, was one of those countries attending and signing and already ratifying into law. And they deposit their instruments, So again, Madam Speaker, please, when they have a chance to talk, they no talk. When somebody else talking, you're interrupting. Madam Speaker, and they say that is their view. Madam Speaker, so on the matter of the environment and commitment of the government of Trinidad and Tobago to climate change and other ideals, this government stands wanting. That's my point. I move now to the next point. To be very clear, Madam Speaker, I am informed that during the period 1995 to 2000, the then UNC administration opened the CNG stations, including those at Rushwood Street, San Fernando, Coquille Village, Peak, Staccagreva, Ramco, Churchill, Roosevelt Highway, and at City Gate. Prior to that, I am informed that we had 1 station open before at Sumsum Hill. Whether that was functioning or not, Madam Speaker, I am not too sure about that. But it is not today, to get into, I use a lighter word, to get into a shouting match as to who did more for the environment and who do less and so on. Governments build upon what other governments did. When we came in 2010, there was 1. We built upon that and introduced 6 to 8 stations. And today we'll be happy if the current administration introduced 20 stations. Nothing is wrong with that. But it's not a shouting match to say who did this, who did that. And the member for Caroni Central, quite rightly, outlined a lot of the issues, a lot of the challenges we face and the achievements as far as it relates to the matter of the environment and what we were doing there. The Minister of Finance told us earlier that part of the approach was to spread the burden of adjustment in the society. There's an interesting angle here, Madam Speaker, that I want to raise. In the context of an economy where we are all aware of job loss, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have in this, Madam Speaker, we have in this country now what is called economic suicides. Persons are killing themselves over their inability to provide for their family. Regrettably, we read in the newspaper, on the death of David Francis, who hung himself.
Perseverance and
a retrenched worker at the Centrin steel plant, I believe.
Yeah.
And the person took his own life over matters relating to inability to provide for the family. That's the context in which we live. Mr. Francis was not the first. I pray he would be the last, but I doubt it. Because the economic situation is so grave. And in that context, we have had job losses. None other than the Minister of Labour came to the House. And one day sat in this House, the Minister of Labour, came from the other place, and rattled out, almost like calling the lotto numbers, the amount of people who were retrenched. I think the tally is today officially 5,000. It could be more like 8,000, 10,000 persons who have left, who have lost their jobs. So we have wanton job loss in the economy.
And a 10-point
But,
plan.
Madam Speaker, during economic recessions as well, do you know there are also job-creating sectors? And the last time we went through this type of painful transition, it was earlier in the first decade of this century. It gave rise to what is called the private security industry. When crime became rampant and so on, the private security industry emerged. Today, that industry employs over 10,000 citizens. Well, some, I think, non-citizens as well. Private security industry. But, Madam Speaker, you may call that low wage, low skill, hard employment, because we know it's a difficult sector, that, unregulated still. But that sector came out of economic difficulties and criminal enterprises expanding, I think, in the early part of 2002, 2009, and so on. Madam Speaker, today there's a next sector developing, and it has developed fully in terms of the used car industry, and even with luxury vehicles too. There is a particular subsector developing of technicians, garages, car wash in this country that treats with luxury vehicles. Colleagues opposite, I know many of them, would enjoy their Benz and BMW, and I understand a Porsche as well was parked up in the airport for some time. Oh yes, foreign used Jaguar as well. And Madam Speaker, the point I'm making is that an industry is creeping up where there are persons who are fixing cars, doing the IT. Today, Madam Speaker, if something goes wrong with one of these luxury vehicles, the computer challenge, the IT challenge, is bigger than the database managing in a ministry. Because if one thing goes wrong with a car and the IT systems there, everything goes down. And today, diagnostic, in fact, they use words like diagnostic now to fix car. Madam Speaker, there's an industry developing of mechanics, of technicians at one level, but also of car wash that handle these vehicles. And the member for San Fernando East would be aware, as he should, that even in Monreport and Coquet, you have, and Current, I think, you have car wash there that hires a lot of people. And I'm sure you are a regular customer there as well, Or they don't fix that? Madam Speaker, those subsectors, if you don't watch how you go about, you make policy by VAPs, you can affect those subsectors where people will even lose their jobs there. Because you don't have demand, people are not purchasing. And this government approach to economic management is to pelt darts in the dark and hope you hit a bullseye. Just fling that. That's the approach to economic management. So we were bewildered when the Prime Minister announced his economic council, the finest minds in the country. They came to and then he said, the Prime Minister said in the House, I think with great sincerity, he said, so long as I'm the leader of this country, I will do all in my power to avoid the IMF. And then the Minister of Finance come back in a plane with the IMF. And the World Bank. As if that. So today, we have subcontracted the management of Trinidad and Tobago to the IMF and the World Bank. They are in charge. And their approach, Madam Speaker, I have an article here. The Guardian of April 23, Saturday gone. And this has to do as well with the diversification issues which the member for Arouca, Maloney, spoke about, which I'll come to later. When, Madam Speaker, none other than retired Professor Dr. Ralph Henry, former PNM Minister Mariano Brown, indicated no need for outside help. Madam Speaker, Professor Henry himself indicated in this article
Lester Henry?
that not Lester Henry.
Oh, he's not Professor.
Dr. Ralph Henry indicated, Madam Speaker, that we have a lot of our own good advice. We have solid people who can make policy prescriptions on this board, Economic Advisory Council. You have Mr. Terence Farrell, Dr. Ralph Balgobin, Professor this, Professor that. Just today they announced 2 new members, Dr. Keith Nurse and I think somebody else. So that you are filling up this Economic Council and the IMF take over the show. Resident in Trinidad and Tobago to assist. Mariano Brown stated, Madam Speaker, a former PNM minister, I believe he is. He said he was bemused and amused that government was going back to the IMF and World Bank when we said we did not want to go there. He says the minister, meaning the Minister of Finance, is trying to validate that what they are doing is right. He's also signaling that the ministry does not have the relevant technical expertise. That is what they're doing. The IMF could not, Mr. Brown said that the intention is to raid the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That is the intention. And to have the IMF validate their policy objectives of raiding the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And today I asked the minister, who is so concerned about this issue of sharing the burden and ensuring that we reduce our dependence on fossil fuel as part of a development strategy that will take us into renewable energy. I am asking the minister, what is the role of the IMF and World Bank vis-a-vis the Economic Advisory Council? Are they to meet? Are they to share ideas? Will they work together? And who asks for this? Did the minister consult this all-important Economic Advisory Council before walking on the plane back? Because that is how it happened. The IMF and the minister came down, I think, with 2 of them holding the same boarding pass. When they boarded the plane, they had their boarding passes together coming to Port of Spain. And this is a betrayal of those persons who supported that administration.
What about the advisors to the minister? Huh? What do they have to say on this?
And Madam Speaker,
Member for Couva South, do you intend to raise an interruption? Well, please confine your comments so that it don't reach to the chair. Member for Couva South.
I am guided, Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, so we have the experts here saying no need for outside help. And we will file the appropriate question to ask the minister. Who is paying for these IMF officials in Trinidad and Tobago? Who is paying? The government is paying. So now we have no money to keep workers.
Honourable Member, your 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you intend to seek my leave?
I seek.
You may continue.
Thank you very much. So, Madam Speaker, the government is paying for the IMF advisors in the country today. They're paying for them to be here, while they're also paying for National Economic Advisory Council members, the membership of which they are increasing every day. Now we are being told by the member for Arouca, Maloney, that they're very clear they want to embark upon a rapid development and diversification strategy. The IDB will now help with that. So what is the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago doing? Yeah. What is the government of Trinidad and Tobago doing if you subcontract to the IMF, the World Bank, the IDB? And Madam Speaker, having spent 5 years liming in opposition, they come into government without a plan, without a clue as to how to develop Trinidad and Tobago. They told the country that they had a plan. But what was that plan? To go to the IMF? And a writer said it today. I don't have time to quote extensively. But I think it was actually a member of the Economic Advisory Council one David Abdullah, former senator, now is crying blood. Having helped to put the PNM in office, he's now saying today, this David Abdullah, that the IMF has a set prescription, retrenchment, privatization, selling out national assets, foreign exchange, changing the foreign exchange, the value of the currency. And today, the member comes to the parliament and tells us, listen, we want to share the burden, but did not even consult with the Economic Advisory Council, of which Mr. Abdullah is a member. He's still a member, so far. And because this is the article, it is in the Newsday, Madam Speaker, of today, page 9. Abdullah says Imbert not sure of what he's doing. Now we knew this.
Read it into the record. Just for the record.
For the record, we knew this in September 2015.
Before.
Mr. Abdullah wake up this morning and discovered that. And then the former governor of the central bank, who they threw out from a window at the financial complex, is now saying that is an OJT Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, I want to ask the Minister of Finance in relation to this measure. Was the measure again?
Member, I would ask you, in terms of that last statement, to find another way to say it. I'm sure.
Madam Speaker, I'm just inquiring kindly from the Attorney General if there was some bug on the seat that was provoking him at regular intervals to rise like this. Madam Speaker, could I continue? Oh.
Member for Oropouche East, in terms of the statement that I'd ask you to address and therefore find a better way to say it, dealt with the central bank. So if you can correct that, and also if you could withdraw that last comment, please.
I withdraw the last comment and I move on. Madam Speaker, the member for Arouca, Maloney, the speaker that was not carded to speak, raised several matters which I'll just touch on briefly, and was somewhat provoked by the member for Caroni Central, who regularly reminds us that the opposite side is without a plan and so on, and I think that is also
rightfully so.
Rightfully, that is his refrain. Madam Speaker, the member took a few minutes to speak about plans and incentivizing the private sector and so on. And today, I can use the word hypocrisy, not hypocrite. Today, the hypocrisy is coming out. When ArcelorMittal asked the government to meet to discuss what they were going to do, they had no time to meet Mittal. And they had no time to meet Mittal, but today speaks about incentivizing the private sector to save jobs. Could you imagine that? When a major multinational was going to pull out to lead to 650 job loss and said, let us meet to discuss our plans, what we are doing, maybe then you could have met with the Mittal Group to speak about incentives to see what you can do as a government. Had we been in office, 650 steel workers would be at their jobs today. I say that categorically and without apology.
Yes.
I say that without apology. Had the partnership government been in power today, 650 workers at Mittal would have been at work. And Centrid, the member for Siparia, would have met or sent a ministerial team to meet that company to discuss with them how we can save jobs. We did it before when we were in office. There were companies that were also finding hard times. Their idea of incentivizing the private sector is Grand Bay. Is Grand Bay asking the Export Bank to
50 million US.
To what? Guarantee a loan. The Import-Export Bank gives demand loans. Today they are not giving demand loans, they are guaranteeing a loan. If that company cannot pay back, its taxpayers will pay that. Madam Speaker, today they have no authority to speak on diversification. When we were there, the hospital projects, capital investment projects, were meant to expand our capacity to earn foreign exchange and health tourism. was meant to expand our ability to attract persons to come to Trinidad and Tobago for healthcare. This is why we made a massive infrastructure investment, training nurses and doctors. For the Minister of Health to tell the country, I don't have staff, what do you want me to do? That is not satisfactory. You cannot do that. And cannot tell us when we will open the Children's Hospital. Cannot tell us, the Minister of Education now telling us, we have some problem with the Penal Debe campus. And cannot tell us, what are you doing about, first, what is your problem? What are you doing with it? That was also meant as an area for diversification. The tertiary education sector is a job-creating sector. When people get jobs, they pay taxes. And when they pay taxes, government earn revenue. It's a simple explanation.
Everything is a problem.
This is it. After 7 months, they come to the table and tell us everything is a problem. And I want to tell my friend from San Fernando East, house is not snow cone, they don't melt. The partnership build houses. We built thousands of houses in San Fernando, Shabuanas, Princess Town. We built houses. The house is not snow cone, it doesn't melt. You know, and I think they banned themselves from using helicopter. But if you do an aerial tour, you will see the massive investment in housing in Central and in South Trinidad. And so after 7 months, you have not built anything. You proudly smiling, giving out keys for houses that we fixed or built. You understand? What are they doing after 7 months? Madam Speaker, they're drinking champagne in Laventille. I see my friend for Laventille West popping bottles in Laventille, drinking champagne. Saw the Prime Minister pouring for someone, he looked like a butler. Madam Speaker, that is what they're doing while we are talking about diversification. That is when we are talking about diversification. And Madam Speaker, this matter before us, Madam Speaker, speaks to this issue of not understanding a sector. Because we don't know how much revenue we are raising from this measure. Why 50% and not 75%? Why 50% and not 25%? Because we don't know how much revenue you get. So it's not revenue, but that defeats your first objective, because then you're not sharing the burden at all. If you don't know how much revenue you are going to raise from this, you cannot argue that you are sharing the burden because you don't know the burden. Then you come to say, well, this will help with environment and so on. And you carry that type of argument. But in the used car sector as well, they have increased the cost of gasoline, of diesel. They are now coming to say they will build CNG plants and things all over the country. And they will go into non-fossil fuel energy and so on. And so far, after 7 months, nothing has happened. It is just talk and talk and talk. And we are seeing the business community in this country is seeing no sign, no solution. And Madam Speaker, this matter of the engine size and cars and so on, everyone knows that if you go beyond 1999 cc, of course, you go into generally luxury vehicle, but not always luxury vehicle. The minister have indicated that there are some bars there to protect farmers and public transport vehicles and so on. When you come down, you get into the cheaper engine size and cheaper cars and so on with less power. And Madam Speaker, the government has no strategic policy in dealing with the car industry. None. Today it will be 50%. When they go along, it might be 75% by September. Yeah. As they go along further, Madam Speaker, they will come back with other taxes. It is a question of tax, tax, tax. The Minister of Finance speaks about Prado vehicle and so on. And I asked him, which minister in this government driving a Prado? Which one? Because that's not the car of choice, I'm sure, for my colleagues opposite. But the minister didn't tell us another interesting point which we can raise on this matter. Is this measure designed as well to save foreign exchange? Is it a matter aimed at reducing the demand for foreign exchange? Because the foreign exchange issue is a troubling issue. Firing the governor of the central bank didn't change anything.
Yes.
Didn't change anything, as they thought it would. So that is a problem as well. Is this measure intended to save foreign exchange? And if so, how? And how much you intend to save by doing this? Madam Speaker, Thank you. Madam Speaker, the member for Caroni Central spoke in great detail about the achievements of the former administration as it related to the environment. So I don't want to go on to that anymore. But the member for Arouca Maloney spoke about the government's great policy decision of reducing VAT from 15% to 12.5%. I don't know of any lobby group in this country that came in the public and say, we demand that you reduce VAT from 15% to 12.5%. They did that as a populist measure that I think they put on the platform. When they realized that they lower VAT to 12.5% and will lose revenue, they then increase taxes and everything. So you gave with one hand and took away with the next hand. It's a smart man. Madam Speaker, they do that in Las Vegas. That is, you do that on a gambling table. Madam Speaker, you give with one hand, you take away with the next hand. So you never win. The House always wins. This is a case where the Minister of Finance is the House. He wants to win with everything he does. So reducing the VAT meant nothing, Madam Speaker, because you increase the cost of living by the plethora of taxes you have placed on the population. And then today, again, this policy, I think Minister Caroni Central dealt with it, shifting blame. Everybody is to blame except the government. So you lower the VAT, you say, listen, we did what we have to do. The fact that the consumer not benefiting, that is not our fault. But you have a regulatory role, a monitoring role. The government of Trinidad and Tobago, through Consumer Division, Legal Affairs and so on, can monitor, can regulate, can ensure that an institution is in place to ensure that supermarkets passed on any benefit at all to the consumer. You cannot come to the parliament and tell the country, well, we did our role, we wash our hands, we lower VAT. No, no, no. You must ensure that the consumer, where the consumer can benefit, does benefit. That is also government's role. That is also policy and program required. And today, they are washing their hands on that matter, Madam Speaker. Yeah, Madam Speaker, I believe I have a couple of minutes left. The member spoke as well of the food import bill and creative sector and so on, and all of that is fine. All that sounds good. But what tangibles are you going to give to incentivize that sector? The creative sector receives support by governments over the years. It is wrong to think that only one government meet and treat with that sector. Several governments have given support. And in fact, another job-creating sector is particularly in the creative industries and to a lesser extent the entertainment sector. Because coming out of the problem we face now is really to identify which are the new sectors for job growth. Which are we know where we're not going to get jobs. We're not going to get jobs in the steel mill. We're not going to get jobs in the government central bureaucracy. We're not or the removing contract workers. Listen, in this country, whether you're you're governor of the central bank or you are sanitation workers in San Fernando, you lost your job.
And they're arresting.
And they arrest the union leader, I think, down in San Fernando as well. Yes. So from governor of the central bank to sanitation workers in San Fernando, all gone. The government need to tell us which are the job-creating sectors you are targeting and how you are going to do that. And in this measure, this one measure, you run the risk of affecting a certain subsector that could lead to further unemployment and job loss and loss of income. And Madam Speaker, the people who are involved in these sectors and so on, if you leave them without jobs, you leave them without income, because you want to cut CPEP and cut URP and cut this and cut that, you are going to, I can't say that. You are going to lead to more economic suicide, and you are also going to lead to more poverty.
Your speaking time.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity accorded to me to make a brief presentation in this very important debate. Madam Speaker, I want to begin, as I must do, by suggesting that my colleagues on the other side, they normally would proceed showing flagrant disregard for the concepts of shame and carefulness in their thoughts and sentiments.
The language, 48.6. Disrespectful.
I'd ask you, member, please, to rephrase that statement.
I thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I find, Madam Speaker, guided by you, that, I would have thought that they would be, given their track record, their recent track record, they'd be a little more careful about the things they say, especially in public. I heard the member for Couva South, you may have missed it, shout across during the course of the presentation of the member for Arouca East, Oropouche East, Oropouche East, that too many ministers. We have 23 ministers in this government. He said that. We have 23 ministers on this side. We came down from the very lofty amount of 33 as established in the last government. In so doing, the public must be reminded that we immediately over the next year the ensuing year would have saved this country about $45 million. That's what we did. And we made the whole...
Point of order. Madam Speaker,
Is it a point of order? Could you quote the standing order? Please proceed.
Thank you very warmly, Madam Speaker. And in that and in so many other things, part of the challenge we face on this side in these times is ready to save this country millions and millions and millions of dollars that had been bleeding over the last 5 years. The member for Oropouche East, he protested loudly during the course of this debate based on your intervention, Madam Speaker, about a comment that would have come from this side, presumably from the mouth, from the lips of the Minister of Finance. Apparently the member for Oropouche East forgot in this House who denigrated this House, similar to a previous member for Tobago East, when that member for Oropouche East shouted on the record in this House some comment about stink mouth. And denigrated this House in a way that was reminiscent of a previous member for Tobago East standing in this Parliament. Madam Speaker, I was about, while he was speaking though, to rise on Standing Order 8.1. The Honourable Member. Standing Order 8.1 demands that the debates in this House be conducted in English. He began, and in his first sentence, I don't know where he found this construction, but he said, tintillate. Now that word does not exist. It is not English. He was in breach of that standing order. He was in breach. He was in breach.
Madam Speaker, 48-1.
Well, I overrule the objection. It is a debate. These matters were raised.
Then went on to describe the intervention by the leader of government business, the member for Arouca Maloney, went on to describe the member's presentation as cameo. Well, I think I had to agree with him here. I took the time to check the meaning of the word cameo, and it means a short, descriptive literary sketch which neatly encapsulates someone or something. And I think the member did just that. Just that. So I'm obliged to agree with him on that score. Another meaning of the word cameo says, a small but noticeable part in a film or play performed by a famous actor. The member for Arouca Maloney's intervention was short. It was sufficiently noticeable to have drawn the standing order 44-8, and the member for Caroni Central needed 2 minutes to attend to issues that she so potently and poignantly raised. So it was noticeable. It didn't go unnoticed. And of course, it was delivered by a very distinguished and famous person and member. So cameo was a proper description, though he intended to be pejorative in his manifestation of the term. But most of all, the member's intervention, the member for Arouca Maloney, was truthful, historically accurate, and honest. All attributes that seem to escape our friends on the other side. The member for Oropouche spoke at length about the business of the IMF. He told us that the political leader of the PNM, the Prime Minister and the member for Dago Martin West came to this house and told the country in great aplomb, he asserted confidently that as long as he was the Prime Minister of this country, he would do all that was within his power to keep an imposition of the IMF out of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I think that was quite noble. And all of us on this side, and all right-thinking citizens would support the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago on this. I applauded it profusely on that occasion, and will do so every time. The fact that we have asked IMF advisors to come here before they have to impose themselves on Trinidad and Tobago and our economy, in accordance with the treaty that we are a member of, a signatory to, I want to compliment the Minister of Finance who encouraged them to Trinidad and Tobago for his ingenious approach in dealing with this. I want to commend him. And the word ingenious, for those who may have missed it, means inventive, creative, imaginative, original, insightful, inspired, perceptive, and intuitive. It is an advanced state of affairs. Forward thinking. For some in this country and in this world, and not always for the wrong reasons, sometimes for good reason, but for some in this country, the IMF is just always a bad word. But I want the citizens to know, for a very long time, Trinidad and Tobago has been a member of the IMF. Since 1962, a member. And the IMF are often and regularly here conducting what they call Article 4 consultations, where on a periodic basis, they would, under the treaty, we agreed to it along with many, many other countries of the world. And they would examine our economic essentials and give advice to protect us from crossing that horrible line. When you cross that horrible line, they then have to impose themselves on the treaty upon you and make some prescriptions that often countries have difficulty in dealing with. So if the Minister of Finance in his absolute wisdom can bring the expertise of the IMF to bear now to guide us, to steer us away from that pitfall, I think he ought to be commended. I think he ought to. The member for Oropouche, asked, what is the government doing? Well, that's what we are doing. We are trying to keep this country out of the hands of an imposed IMF. And we made that very clear. We are managing this difficult country in a very difficult time, in a difficult internationally or economic environment. He quoted David Abdullah, a member of the advisory committee. David Abdullah and many others were selected by this government, not people who are beholden to this government or members of the PNM. We, in the public interest, put together some of the best minds in the country in that advisory committee to assist, to contribute to the well-being of this country. That's a noble thing. That's a noble thing. And we're not afraid of David Abdullah. In fact, we welcome his brilliance and his thoughts. They had him as part of their government. He was a UNC senator. He blocked his nose for about a year, and when he couldn't do it no more, he ran away and left them alone. So if David Abdullah has a view, he's free to express it. And I read the article that the member made reference to. And what David Abdullah was essentially saying is that the minister, and I don't agree with him, but he was saying that the Minister of Finance demonstrates that he has no confidence in local economists. Well, our advisory board is packed with local economists. And all the economists in the central bank and in the Ministry of Finance are all locals. We are not averse to that at all. But David Abdullah was essentially taking the point that the Minister of Finance is showing greater confidence in the international economists as opposed to the locals. And I think I've disposed of that as being inaccurate already. So I want to press on. The measures that we are dealing with here today two of them essentially. It's two motions brought to this House by the Minister of Finance, and in essence, one is to affirm the customs order to give effect to the measures that we are debating, and the other one is the order itself to be confirmed by this Parliament. It has to do, as the member for Caroni Central demonstrated, and we all know, it has to do with issues of taxation, issues of revenue generation, and issues of environmental concern. But around all of that, it has to do with the management of our economic affairs given the new circumstances in which we are put. I want to place on the record, just again say some of the untruths that may have fell from the lips of my friends on the other side. I want to make the point very clear, particularly for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is well known that fossil fuels have serious adverse environmental impact. CNG is a cheaper and a more cleaner fuel. And as a recognition of that, up to before 2010, the government of which I am proudly a part, and the party of which I am more proudly a part, I'm always proudly a part, which offered this country government for so many years in the national life. We had established CNG stations in Mayaro, in Arima, 2 stations in Arima, in Mount Lambert, in Sealots, in Barataria, Ryson Road in Port of Spain, Coquille Village, San Fernando, Rushford Street in San Fernando, Rushworth Street in San Fernando, yes, Point 14, Couva, Chaguanas, 2 stations in Chaguanas, Curep on the highway, and in Claxton Bay. We did that a long, long time ago. And I remember budget after budget, the last Minister of Finance, not the last, the one before, Senator Hawaii, coming to this Parliament and telling us ad nauseum that they would put more in place. I don't think they managed to do very much more than that. Our record stands tall. The member for Caroni Central, he told us people have to pay, on account of these measures, citizens have to pay more for cars. Well, okay, that's true. He told us a lot about taxation and revenue, and that the Minister of Finance didn't mention it, as though the Minister of Finance was trying to hide something. I just want to remind the member for Caroni Central and his colleagues in the UNC that the government needs money to run the country. Must have that. And the government today has no money. Minister of Finance came here on diverse occasions and made that pellucidly clear. And therefore, this government finds itself scrimping and scraping for revenue. Parsimonious conduct, if you may. The member for Caroni Central asks, why are we raising money through taxation? I would have, in another place, described that as foolish. But of course, this is Parliament, and I ought not to do so here, and would not. What is this revenue for? He wants us to tell him now what is the revenue we are collecting that would go into the consolidated fund. What is it for?
I said you had no plan.
I am being disturbed, Madam Speaker. If you would protect me, I should be thankful.
Member for Caroni Central, I remind you of Standing Order 47, which deals with interruptions. Continue, please.
Wants to eat his cake, give it away and still have it. You spoke already. He asks, what is this revenue for? What are our priorities? Our priority at this time of necessity is to stabilize this economy, to stabilize this country from the turbulence that the UNC left it on. That's our priority. And I'll give you an example of that turbulence. They decided, the last government, that they would construct a highway from San Fernando to Point 14. The engineers' estimates, internal engineers' estimates, was $3.6 billion. We are facing the specter, Madam Speaker, after 5 years of their mismanagement and waste and all kinds of confusion around it. It's still incomplete, 49% of the work done, and this country will eventually pay $10 billion to do it. They did not borrow from the World Bank or the IDB at very low interest rates with concessions and a moratorium in order to fund it. They decided in their lack of wisdom to do it from the current account and left us with a big hole to deal with. It will take this country and the taxpayers on whose part they very deceptively pretend to speak $10 billion. He made a meal over the fact that we had announced our intention to give this country, by way of a modernized, efficient transportation system, a rail system, a mass transit system. We never settled, we called it mass transit because we did not decide exactly in advance what it would be, what form it would take. We also did not, we were careful throughout the campaign, every one of us. We never told this country, we will give you a mass transit system. We said that is the PNM's plan. And when we go to government, we will seek the independent expert advice from an objective, independent, knowledgeable body, the IDB. And if they said that they thought it was feasible, all things considered, then we would have done it. That's what we said. And true to our word and in honesty and with distinction, we went to the IDB with the project, and they, having a look at the national economy, using the experience they had from around the world, looking at what we had intended, they said at this time it is not feasible, and we told the country in advance, if the IMF said it was not feasible, we would not have imposed that on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's all. Honest, dignified, real, and true. And those are the facts. Those are the facts. Member for Caroni Central. So this government knows exactly what it is doing. This Minister of Government knows exactly what he is doing. And I've been doing it for the last 7 months in the Ministry of Works. And I can boastfully say today, and I'll bring evidence if you need it, I, as Minister of Works, have saved this country billions of dollars, millions of dollars since I sat in that place. And this country will see more and more of that as we go forward. They'll see more. The member for Caroni Central, you hold on. You hold on. Not 1 cent will be stolen or wasted once I have strength in my body. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. The member for Caroni Central, he said the people, in colloquial terms, the people are balling. Well, they didn't start balling now. They ball bad and hard for the last 5 years like goat. They ball. The UNC make them ball. It's only pain you all gave them. And all they tell me, I was in my constituency all of yesterday, all they tell me is that they want to see some people get jailed. That's what they tell me. They tell all of us that. Jail. I'm talking to a group of people in Success Village yesterday. I am talking to them about what we are doing, and I saw red eyes watching me. All they want is jail. That's all they want. Jail. And I had to assure them, the member for San Fernando West as Attorney General, and the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West as Minister in the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. They are working assiduously, getting behind all the nuances and all the treachery and all the tricks that they put upon this country, bit by bit, sheet by sheet, line by line, and following process, and a day will come. On that I say no more. He cried out about used car dealers. He reminded us that they import some as little as 15 cars, some up to 200 cars. I remember in the Senate as an opposition senator, I remember as a citizen of this country, for 5 years they had a constant running battle with the used car operators, used car importers in this country. When it wasn't Vass and Barrett, it was the Prime Minister herself, the then Prime Minister. They had a running battle with them as they were trying to bring new people into that market and doing all kinds of things. They seem to forget, and that's the reason why I began how I began, demonstrating to you, Madam Speaker, that it appears as though they are averse to the concept of shame. Any objection? Take the objection.
Thing which you scolded him for. Yes. No respect for the chair.
Amber, please continue.
I thank you very warmly, Madam Speaker. We decided that we would, for the sake of the environment, and you know, we don't have disposal facilities here for a lot of junk. So foreign used cars eventually end up on the dump heap here, you know. So you know what? We reduced the age of the cars from 6 years to 4 years. That's a good thing. And the member for Caroni Central tried to mislead us to tell us about how hard 4-year-old cars are to get. But still the used car dealers on whose behalf he purported to speak today, they want to import. If you give them a license for 500, they'll take it. And new cars, he admitted that new cars are being sold in Trinidad and Tobago, not even 4 years old, 0 years old. Sold aplenty. So I don't get the point. I don't get the point. And that he suggested, the member for Caroni Central suggested that the used car dealers are wondering whether we are squeezing them out of the industry to favor the new car dealers. No, it was we who introduced the foreign used car regime in this country. It's we who opened it up. And as you go along, you improve it, you do things, and that's what responsible government is all about. So I don't know what is all that bleating from the member for Caroni Central and talking sanctimoniously about the fact that we are taxing poor and salaried people and we wouldn't go after the business people, some of whom or most of whom are not paying taxes. They knew that for the last 5 years, did nothing about it. We proposed a revenue authority to make tax collection more efficient and more workable in this country, and they objected to it.
Refused to support. We still objected.
It was we who decided that the little man in this country should not be paying any income tax if he earned in the first place up to $5,000, and recently the Minister of Finance took it to $6,000, and I would beat the desk for that every day. It's we who did that. What is he telling us about the poor man? It's we who introduced GATE. It's we who introduced CEDAP. It's we who introduced the school feeding program. It's we who introduced free transport, supported and subsidized books. It is we who did that for the poor people. We wrote a document called Accounting for the Tax Dollar since way back in the 80s. We could account for the tax dollar in this country. And we have always done that. And if we didn't do for poor people in this country, you tell me who did. They had big, look, let me leave that for another debate. Let me leave that. The Board of Inland Revenue obviously needs modernization, and the Revenue Authority was the way forward. Only last week, I might say, the Cabinet is contemplating strengthening the Inland Revenue Division and giving them more technical skills, aplenty. This morning we dealt with it in F&GP. So let me press on. Madam Speaker, the measures that are here today, the measures that are before us today, would have a direct impact upon an institution that is within my purview, and that is the licensing division, the transport division. So that the efficient operation of the transport division is very critical to all that will happen here, because it is the licensing officers and the transport division who will decide whether a car is 19,099 cc's or otherwise for these measures to kick in. So let me say a little bit about the licensing division. That institution has posed a significant challenge for the last 20 years. There are some people, including me in this country, who I am on record as saying it is one of the most corrupt and inefficient places in the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. And now that it falls to me, as Minister of Works and Transport, I feel committed and duty-bound to taking action to improving it. I'm not going to sit down and do nothing about it. Many efforts to improve it have largely failed. In 2009, however, PNM government, in an attempt to deal with this problem, signed on with a heads of agreement. We signed a heads of agreement with the government of Canada to establish a motor vehicle authority, which was to take the operations of the old licensing division upward and forward. The agreement provided for the province of Nova Scotia to provide information, advice, and subject matter expertise, and secondly, to access to a motor vehicle registry software under a software agreement. We did that. Madam Speaker, yes, the PNM did that. The idea was to be able to provide a service, a quick service to the members of the public around the country at kiosks even, where this information held at the licensing office would be easily accessible. Pursuant to the heads of agreement, the Barrington Consultancy Group from the province of Nova Scotia was contracted to assist this government in that transformation process. Up to May 2010, prior to May 2010, the then government had reached its target for the transformation of the licensing division. The first phase was completed. This included digitization of the licensing records, completion of business policies and procedures, training of staff, installation of software systems, motor vehicle authority operating model for Trinidad and Tobago, and completion of an MVA bill. We had completed a bill up to 2010. Subsequent to May 2010, the project was undermined by delays and mismanagement. One of the factors I discern for this was when the last government, trying to create another ministry as it did, to make 33 ministers so they could have favored 33 of their friends. They separated, yes, 33. They separated, in colloquial terms, 33. They separated the Ministry of Works and called it the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure and the Ministry of Transport. That project was then in the old Ministry of Works and Transport. It now went to the Ministry of Transport Simpliciter, they having separated it. And that transition, it took the new people at the Ministry of Transport a long time to become acquainted, to acquire the resources, the skills, to develop the whole ministry. So it took them at least 2 years, I'm advised, to get going on this matter. Eventually, not long before the elections, they found themselves in an attempt to carry out this policy with the MVA. They found themselves, as I said here before and we said in the campaign, and to remind the national community, they spent what? They were supposed to have spent $45 million on a building in Caroni settlement. They eventually spent on that building $269 million. Every time I drive past and I see it, I ask myself, where is the $269 million in that?
Who's the contractor?
And the contractor is a well-known, a friend, SIS, who disappeared shortly after the elections of 2015. According to the reports, gone to Panama, can't be found. Favorite friend of the UNC, $269 million on what was supposed to cost $45 million. The need, however, Madam Speaker, for a new motor vehicle authority to improve service delivery, efficiency to the people of Trinidad and Tobago remains critically urgent. They spent a lot of money, but they did not achieve the mark.
Honourable Member for Laventille West, your 30 minutes have expired. You are entitled to avail yourself of a further 15 minutes. Might I ask how much longer you intend to be?
I would use every moment of it.
And might I then suggest, if it's a convenient time, that we take the suspension now? This House do stand suspended for half an hour.